I've been asked a lot about the topic of how to go pro in poker, and I want to share my top 3 tips of what to do if you plan on becoming a full-time poker player. First of all, number 1, the most important thing I think if you want to become a full-time pro in poker is you need to take inventory. You need to do a proper assessment, and the reason for that is a lot of people I meet and talk to me is they don't know where they're at. They don't know how good they are. And obviously you can never exactly find out, but you can get a pretty good idea. As if you tell me everything about your history and your statistics and where you're at and your results, I can give you a pretty good idea of how good you are. And you have to do the same. But that's not only everything. You have to assess your poker skills, but you also have to assess your personal situation. Because you have to combine these things where if your starting level is beginner, you can still have the plan to go pro, but the path will be longer. If, let's say, you know nothing, there's no way you can become a pro in 3 months. You will probably need a year or 1.5 or 2 years, depending on how much time you put in, how fast you learn, how effective you learn, who you have around you. So there are a lot of factors that play into it, but the most important thing is you properly assess your situation and manage your expectations. If, for example, you have a full-time job right now and you plan to go pro, you need a plan to transition into becoming a pro. So if that is your goal, you want to become a pro and you have a full-time job, you need to plan how you get to that point where you stop doing anything else. Because being a pro and working a full-time job is not compatible at the same time. At least I couldn't think of who could pull that off. It's generally very different lifestyles. It's a lot of time commitment for a job. So for me, it's if you have a job, then poker will always just be a hobby. It's not your profession. So I think it's also very important to take proper inventory there and be very, very honest to yourself to not have wrong expectations. You can't become the best in the world if you dedicate 10 hours a week. It's just not really possible. How much time you invest is very important, but also that level of honesty, where to invest it. I see a lot of players investing 40, 50, 60 hours. They will have a very hard time making it pro because they are not open to challenge their mindset. And I think that's the most important part in that first step is question everything you're doing. Question how good you are, question where you're at, question your approach, get that input from other sources. Ask people around you who have made it, who have more experience, reach out to pros who can maybe give you input on where you're at. So the most important thing in that assessment is your skill level as a poker player, where you're at in terms of skill, what's your ROI, what are your statistics. If you don't know what that is, then you probably need to progress a bit further and play some hands and kind of figure out a bit more about the game. There are a lot of great coaching and training content out there. So there are a few people who create some pretty great content. So this is a great entry to learn. Like the way I learned in the beginning was also through forums, exchanging with others, and training content. So it's just very normal to learn from better people and utilize everything that's out there, and then manage expectations and make it very clear what you're willing to commit. So if someone is a hobby player and maybe winning at low stakes but doesn't really know how to get further, is you need to commit that time and energy and be open to improve and change. You need to address where you're at right now. So let's say you maybe play $5 to $10 tournaments and you maybe are slightly beating them. That's a good starting point. You will probably need to invest 1.5 years, 2 years of time to get to beat mid stakes, to get to beat high stakes. The cool thing about poker is I really truly believe that it is rather easy to get to mid and high stakes and very hard to get beyond high stakes. Like I think it's very achievable to beat $100, $150 average buy-in, and very hard to beat the higher stakes, because what I've seen is that few people in these mid stakes are very dedicated to put in the time and continuously improve their game. So if you are dedicated and if you want to improve, you can really make a lot of steps. So the first part, a really true and honest self-assessment of where you're at, and then committing to that is, to me, the most important part to becoming a pro. The second point that I think is extremely, extremely important, especially nowadays, is your study routine. So if you have done that assessment, if you have checked, okay, where I'm at, where do I want to be, and what is the time commitment I can give, and be realistic with that and get it challenged by others, now it's about investing your time as much as possible. The biggest mistake I see people make is that they do not have a proper improvement routine. They they're mostly lazy. That's just the matter of fact. Is they grind, they play poker, they just don't really improve. They don't question their game enough, they don't ask themselves questions when they play a hand, they don't review hand, they don't mark hands, they don't talk hands about with their friends, they don't review them in solvers, they don't utilize all the software that's out there. That is the main reason why it's so easy to improve in poker, because if you do all that, if you invest the time, if you work with Hold'em resources calculator for jamming spots, and you get better with the short stack spots, and then you work with solvers to improve your post-flop delay, and you play very accurate pre-flop ranges. That's actually the easiest hack to get to mid to high stakes, is just have a really solid pre-flop game plan. If you want to improve, like that's always my number one thing, is if you don't get your pre-flop stats in line, you're just not dedicated, period. It's very available. There's very little room for discussion. Every player I see that plays mid-stakes or lower is messing it up. So I think the easiest way to improve is just have a very solid pre-flop game plan, because that's your foundation. That's where you then play post-flop hands. But it's basically always the same. People have the wrong opening ranges, they don't defend enough from the big blind, they don't 3-bet enough, they don't flat enough in position. So there are a lot of very easy to fix things where it's just about being right. You can be off one combo, but you can't be off two combos or three combos. It's just what it has to be. So pre-flop ranges and study routine, very, very important. And then developing these routines where you constantly learn and improve. Formulating your train of thought and your logic, and then challenge it with something. It can be any reflection tool. It can be a solver. There I highly suggest Odin Poker. I think it's super cool. You can just go on the website and then click through the hand, challenge your thought. I do a lot of my review sessions with it. On the highest level, it can be with a solver, but it also can just be with friends talking about a hand. Personally, my study routine right now is very much based on solvers. So I think the moment you get into a bit higher limits, it's always going to be about formulating my logic and then trying to improve and find holes within that logic. Very, very important tips for this. Look for wide ranges. So late position could be button against big blind, or button against small blind, or small blind against button, or small blind against big blind. Like, these are the spots we want to be looking at because we play them the most often. So we want to look at late position spots with wide ranges. We want to look at spots that come up often, right? We don't want to look at a river spot we never face unless we can take a logic for other spots. We want to look at spots that come up very often, so you need to have a solid flop play and understand a lot of these situations, different bet sizings. It's very, very crucial when you want to improve your game. Also very important is, if you start out improving and learning with solvers, do not really look at anything above 50 big blind.